Hi, my name is Liana Bigot. In this video, I will give you an overview of the neuron. So the nervous system is composed of more than 100 billion cells known as neurons, which look like this. It is actually a cell in the nervous system that is responsible for receiving and transmitting information. They are considered to be the building blocks of the nervous system. So you might be asking, why are they so unique from other cells? Well, their membrane is designed to send information to other cells. There are three types of neurons, which are the sensory neuron, the motor neuron, and the interneuron. So let's learn about the sensory neurons. Afferent neurons are a specific type of sensory neuron. They carry information from the sensory receptors to the brain or spinal cord. So what they actually do is detect external or internal changes and send that information to the central nervous system. So in this diagram, you can see that there are different types of sensory receptor cells, like vision, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. You can see for the vision receptor cell that it causes the detection of light to be perceived as sight. Sensory neurons are why you perceive something as hot. If you're able to snap your fingers or wiggle your toes, the motor neurons are at play. Those movements result from a series of electrical signals that start in the brain. Motor neurons carry instructions from the brain and our spinal cord to the muscles and glands. So what are efferent neurons, you might be thinking? Efferent neurons are motor neurons that carry neural impulses away from the central nervous system and towards muscles to carry out movement. This is why you're able to clench your fists. Interneurons connect the motor neurons with the sensory neurons. Essentially, they transfer signals between the sensory and motor neurons. They play a huge role in our reflexes. So there are different parts of a neuron. The branching tree-like fiber shown in the diagram is known as a dendrite. It is responsible for the collection of information from other cells and sends that information to the cell body. So the cell body, or soma, contains the cell's nucleus. The cell body is known as the cell's life support because it controls the cell's activities and contains the cell's genetic information. An axon, which is right here, looks like a long tail. It is responsible for transmitting messages from the cell body to other neurons, muscles, and glands. The myelin sheath is a greatly extended and modified plasma membrane surrounding the nerve's axon. The sheath is responsible for the protection of axons and helps speed up the electrical signal. If the myelin sheath is not damaged, the signals will be sent and received quicker. Terminal buttons are small knobs at the end of the axon. They are responsible for releasing neurotransmitters and they form the presynaptic neuron of the synapse. In essence, they form junctions with other cells. The synapse, which you can see in this diagram, is a junction where the transmission of information occurs. Essentially, information from one neuron flows to another neuron across the synapse. The synapse consists of a presynaptic ending and a postsynaptic ending, which you can see from this diagram right here. A presynaptic ending contains neurotransmitters, the mitochondria, and other cell organelles. A postsynaptic ending contains receptor neurotransmitters. A synaptic cleft, or synapse, is the space between the presynaptic and postsynaptic endings. So, neurotransmission is the transfer of information between neurons. For communication between neurons to happen, an electrical impulse must travel down an axon to the synapse. First, a message from another cell travels from the dendrites to the cell body and then onwards towards the end of the axon. Second, the message causes neurotransmitters to be released from the axon into the synapse. The neurotransmitters travel across the synapse and attach to the receptors on the dendrites. When the neurotransmitter attaches to the receptors, the message has been sent. Neural activity. When a neuron is not sending a signal, it is at rest and considered to be at a resting membrane potential. The inside of a neuron is negative relative to the outside. The concentrations of different ions endeavor to balance out on both sides of the membrane, but they cannot because the cell membrane allows only ions to pass through the ion channels. Potassium ions easily can cross through the membrane, but sodium ions have a more difficult time. There is a sodium-potassium pump that uses energy to move 3 sodium ions out of the neuron for every 2 potassium ions. When all these forces balance out, it's apparent that there is a difference in the voltage on both sides of the membrane. At rest, there are more sodium ions outside the neuron and more potassium ions inside. An action potential happens when a neuron sends information down an axon. If a stimulus is above a certain threshold, a nerve will fire, which is called the all or none response. This explosion of electrical activity creates a reduction in the electric potential across the membrane of the neuron, also known as depolarization. Action potentials are caused when different ions cross the neuron's membrane. When an incoming impulse exceeds the threshold of excitation, the membrane will open, allowing an inflow of sodium ions. Sodium goes in while potassium goes out. Inside the membrane would be positively charged compared to the outside. In the refractory period, the neuron cannot create another action potential. The neuron is recharging. A sodium-potassium pump replaces the ions into the correct position. The sodium goes outside and the potassium goes inside.